was
we
recorded
just started.
because
Now
I
we just
got
started
it.
recording. Thank you for that reminder. I'm just taking myself
Okay, great.
off of this.
Thank you.
It's distracting to see myself looking back at me.
No
So,
problem.
so I want to suggest as the specific introduction to today that you know when you deep sleep and you wake up and you're like, oh my God, what time is it? Did I sleep for an hour? Did I sleep for a minute? You know, sometimes you're so disoriented, like you're jet lagged. You wake up and oh my God, what day is it? You know, is it Shabbos? Where am I? Right? So waking up, that's what I would call this class, trying to understand where we are in our timeline, in our Shmita and Yovel cycle, our sabbatical year and our Jubilee cycle. That is the purpose of today. Next year, this Rosh Hashanah, in 2.5 months or so, 3 months, that's going to be the Shmita year. Whoa, I just woke up. Where are we? How did you, who says? How do we know? You know, I know it's Shabbos because, you know, pretty much we have a good rhythm on that one. I know what time it is. I have a watch. What about our Jewish historical halachic calendar? Where are we? How did we get here? How did we get to now? So that's the point of today's class. It has, of course, halachic ramifications. You got to know when Shmita is, just like you don't know when Shabbos is. But it also, I think, has deeper. It will help us root ourselves and understand where we are in the ongoing cycles of Shmita and Yovel. We started this last week with a bit of a balagan. I'm going to pass out new and improved source sheets. For those of you who are on, we do have a number of people on Zoom. What I guess I'm going to do, let me do this. Does someone here have a phone and maybe the WhatsApp of one of either Rochelle, Rachel, who's Elisheva, my wife? No, I don't think so. Chaya. Did someone take a picture of this and send this to one of them and let them send? Oh, is there? You have the isn't there a WhatsApp group of Bat Medrash? But you can't put into it. Could someone just take a picture of that and send it to the people here?
I can take a picture.
Judy's the administrator of the WhatsApp group. If you send it to her, she can send it to everybody.
So maybe someone send it to Judy. Okay. In the meantime, we got plenty today, I think. With a new and improved version. I even added my own translations where it was lacking in Sefaria. Yeah, plenty. Okay. The only thing we're missing really is a whiteboard because we have some calculations to do today. But I guess, you know, this is better than a whiteboard, right? Is there a whiteboard here? Is there a whiteboard, like a chalkboard? All right, not yet. Okay, one of these days. So we'll do it. Okay. So I think the best way to approach this is as follows. We're going to divide the historic panorama, the timeline of the Jewish people in Shmita into 4 periods. There was the period of the first temple when we came to Eretz Yisrael after leaving Egypt. There's the second temple period. There's the post-second temple period, meaning after the exile from in the year 68 of the Common Era through, let's say, the mid-19th century. And then from the mid-19th century till today will be the 4th period. Today, we're going to cover the first 3 periods of the Shmita. And how is it counted? And what does it mean for us? So we have in front of us the Rambam. I think I mentioned at the end of last week that one of the reasons Shmita is sometimes a little bit more complicated than other halachas is we don't have a Shulchan Aruch. We don't have Rabbi Yosef Karo on this. We're going back to earlier sources. And the Rambam really is the pillar of the Shmita halacha. And we have here the Rambam in his laws of Shmita and Yovel. Again, Yovel is the Jubilee year. And this is in chapter 10. It's interesting. He puts it at the end towards the end of his treatment of Shmita. And we're going to read it. We're going to explain it. And again, if I had a whiteboard, I'd be drawing some kind of a timeline. If you have a pen, you can kind of make notes for yourself and kind of follow along and make the calculations together. But again, I'm not going to, I spent last night with my chavruta, with the calculators and the notepads, and we tried to make sure all the numbers plugged in correctly. But again, I don't want to, you can do it on your own if you want, but it's really just to give you the overall picture of how it works. I found it fascinating. And the bonus today is the Rambam is going to tell us not just how we know that this year is Shmita, he's also going to reveal to us something, how halacha works. One of the secrets of halachic decision making. How do we know who the halacha is like? Thank you. They shouted after them. I hope y'all out there in Zoom have it. So here we have the Rambam. And the Rambam says, and feel free to object. I'm gonna say, let's read it just in English, and wants to read it also in Hebrew can. Someone want me to read it also in Hebrew? No? No? Okay. I just want to be smooth and clear. I don't want to do anything that will just kind of, and someone will tune out if we're reading the Hebrew. I think it's just worth it to do the English. If I see something that's important to be specific in the original, I will refer to it. Okay, says the Rambam. When did they begin to count the Jubilees? Pay attention, the Rambam now is not interested necessarily in Shmita. He really wants to know about the 50-year cycle, right? And just to refresh your memory, we said this last week, we have 7-year cycle. The 7th year is the sabbatical year, like the Shabbat is in the week. This is a week of years. Then we have the 7 cycles of sabbatical years, 7 Shmitas, 7 times 7 years, 49 years. The 50th year is the Jubilee year, is the Yovel. That's even more radical in terms of its, in terms of what it means. The land goes back, slaves are released. It's much more far-reaching and dramatic. It only happens once every 50 years. We saw the end of last week. I don't know if you all here. I will just recap this. There was a very basic discussion in the Gemara. What happens after the 50th year? Is the year 51? Is that now? Right, we're starting the second Jubilee cycle. Remember we said that? Is it year 1, meaning is it 1 of the sabbatical cycle? Or is the 50th year, does it go in both directions? Is it this twilight year, which is the 50th year capping off the first 49? And simultaneously it serves as the first of the next 50. That was a disagreement in the Gemara. We will see, and I want to ask you, pay close attention. You tell me, when we read along, how does the Rambam rule on that question? There's going to be a similar question coming up. But on this question, question A, you tell me how you see the Rambam ruling here. Did not cover this in the Shulchan Aruch. Not in the Shulchan Aruch, no. So he says, how did it start? What's the root? I'm sorry, in English. 14 years after they entered Eretz Yisrael. We didn't count when we left Egypt. We didn't count as our calendar now goes, the Hebrew calendar goes from the creation of the world. We count from entry into Israel plus 14. What is that? The Rambam explains. As the verse states, 6 years you shall sow your fields, in 6 years you shall prune your vineyards, and you will gather its harvest. Says the pasuk, the Torah says, Tizra sadeh cha, your field, not the field, your field, your vineyard. The Gemara learns out from that until every person identifies his land. There are some mitzvot which we began as soon as we entered the land of Israel. We began the tithing, trumot, masrot. Here, regarding Shmita, the Rambam says that it emphasizes your plot of land, your vineyard, your field. Wait, when we entered the land, it was perhaps in the collective sense, the Jewish people's land. there was still the war, there was the conquest, that took 7 years, but even then, it wasn't divvied up to tribes, and within the tribes, the families, until Simcha Mirvis got his plot of land. So how long did it take? 7 plus 7, as the Rambam says. It took 7 years to conquer the land, and 7 years to divide it. Okay? So that is the beginning. I think that's also it's a beautiful idea about the idea of the personal, individual requirement here of having your own land, being identified with your, what's the word, legacy, inheritance. That's when it begins. And yes, if any of you are thinking, when we come to discuss nowadays, what I call, the fourth period of Shmita, where even if the majority of the Jewish people would be here in Israel, even if all the Jewish people would be here in Israel, what about this? Can we say today that we know who we are? Well, who we are in the sense that, am I Yisachar or Zevulun? Am I Yehuda or Binyamin? And what is my specific soul root, land root in the land? It is a soul root. I said that actually on purpose, right? As the Karlbach song goes, a return to the land of your soul, right? So it means something. The fact that we don't know today who we are in terms of the tribes in our family, that's not a technicality. And it's not a halachic technicality either. It actually has ramifications why today we don't do the Jubilee. We don't have Yovel today. And it has ramifications on what is the level of the requirement for Shmita. Is Shmita d'oraita or d'Rabbanan? Is Shmita still ordained as a Torah mitzvah? Or is it only, quote unquote, and I hope you know this, I say, only a Rabbanan, a rabbinically instituted mitzvah, because we don't have that full power of being in the land, each in their own sadeh, field, and vineyard.
A few years ago, I was in the old city for 20 years, but a few years ago, we did have a Jubilee throughout the land. Yeah, we absolutely did.
Oh.
I can tell you what year, because I still have a bottle of wine from the, with the container that was celebrating the Jubilee. And in July, we had all kinds of things throughout the year. And we even had, they were down by the coast, like there were trumpets and everything.
Okay, I hear you. So we will believe netter by the end of today, understand what that meant. In other words, I'll just tell you now so no one gets confused. That I would call a zecher liyovel. That would be a remembrance. In other words, no, if you owned your house in the old city, I don't think anyone came and said, you were living there, but this is really my ancestral property. Get out. It's coming back to me. But yeah. Yeah. If what? If right. Yeah. It's a yeah.
Yeah, you have to forfeit when you sell your house.
And there are halachic issues. You're right. There are halachic issues. So anyway, so in the beginning of the 14th. Now let's just make a quick calculation. If I had a whiteboard, you've seen people do this on the whiteboard before. I'm not gonna get into the nitty-gritty details. I don't have the way to show it to you. But if you just want to follow through, it means that after 14 years of conquering and allocating the land, now everyone has their own specific parcel. What happens now? We begin counting. So the 15th year in the land is the first year of the Shmita cycle, right? After counting 7 of those is the first Shmita. So anyone will make the calculation. After how many years in the land of Israel did we observe the first Shmita? How many? No, the Shmita, not the Yovel, the Shmita. This is the first 21, right? Right. 7 plus 7 is conquering and the allocation. And then we begin counting the 21st. Okay. Then we counted another 7, right? Another 6 cycles like that, another 42 years. In the 50th year since we started counting, in the, you said it, 64th or 5th, depends on how you start, that would be the first Yovel. The Rambam records, just to give you a perspective of like Jewish history, not only been on one foot, on one toe, we were in the land for 890 years. From the time we entered till the destruction of the temple, and I'll say it in a secular term, in secular calendar, 586 BCE. We were 480 years from Joshua's entry until we built the Beit HaMikdash. Shlomo HaMelech built the Beit HaMikdash. The first temple stood 410 years. 480 plus 410 is 890. 890. That's how many years we were there. Take away 14 from 890, getting me a little bit shaky ground here. That is 876. So for 876 years, 876 years, we were doing the cycle of Shmita in Yovel. Truth be told, if you read Yirmiyahu, towards the end of the book of Yirmiyahu, on the eve of destruction, Yirmiyahu echoes the words of the curses in the end of Sefer Vayikra and says, you didn't keep the Shmita year. It's definitely one of the hardest mitzvahs in the Torah to keep. In fact, Eish HaTorah, in their famous Discovery Seminar, has one of their quote-unquote proofs for the divine origin of the Torah, the Shmita. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but they say, if this would have been some kind of like invention of a group of rabbis, all of a sudden, everyone take off a whole year and don't do any work. It's so radical. It had to have been from the very beginning, from the origins, from Sinai. I don't want to get into the whole details, but it's such a radical. Like Yirmiyahu says, they didn't keep it. For many times, they did not keep it. But at least what the Torah demanded, the Rambam counts. If you break it up, 850 divided by 50 is 17. There were 17 Yovel cycles in the first temple. The first temple was destroyed. Here, we can read it inside here. Follow me. The Israelites counted 17 jubilees from the time they entered the land until they left. Right? That's an accurate translation, but I don't know if it's historically till they left. They didn't exactly leave. They were exiled, right? The year in which they left, when the first temple was destroyed, happened to be the year following the sabbatical year. In other words, if you make the calculation, I did this last night with my chavrusa, it turns out that the last year, the 90th year, the 890th year of being in Eretz Yisrael, that was the year after the Shmita. It was the first year after the Shmita, and the Rambam lets us know that it was the 36th year of the Jubilee. Now, there were 17 Jubilees, and here I know there's a little bit of a little quirk. I'm not going to get into it right now. There were 17 Jubilees. How many is 17 times 50? 17 Jubilees, meaning 17 Yovels times 50. 17 times 50, 850. The Rambam says, and then plus another 36 years. The 36th year, if you follow it, if you don't, it's okay. 35 is a divisible by 7, right? So the 35th year was Shmita. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in the 36th year, year 1. Just as a trick always, if you divide the number of years by 7, the remainder will always be what Shmita year you're in right now, okay? Now, as soon as the temple was destroyed, says the Rambam, this counting ceased. When it ceased, the land remained desolate for 70 years. So now we have a very important precedent, which is going to basically help us because we're without a temple also. So I want to know not just how it worked when the Jews were in the land with a temple. I want to know how it was when they were in exile. And the Rambam tells us, you know what happened? They stopped.
Did they stop counting?
Not only did they stop observing it, there is no Shmita observation in Bavel. It's only in Eretz Yisrael. But not only that, the cycle stopped. The cycle of Shabbos never stopped. You know, you could have the Gregorian calendar, the Julian calendar. You can make a leap year. You can whatever. Shabbos is 7 days and it's rolling straight from the beginning, as in Bereshit, right? There's no pause on that cycle. Here we discover that according to the Rambam, at least, during those 70 years, it's over. Now, what this means is two things. Thing number one is that it means if I want to know today where we're holding, I don't necessarily have to get into the itsy bitsy calculation of when that was, because what I'm doing now is not based on that. We've cut that off. Okay, so I'm not today. If you want to know that next year, upcoming year, 5782 Shmita, what the Rambam is already telling us, it's not because we're continuing some cycle and pattern and counting rhythm from the first temple. That was severed. Okay. Number two, we have to understand is, okay, well, what cuts off a Shmita? In other words, does the fact that we weren't in the land, or is it the fact that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed? What was the critical factor that cut off the counting? Because maybe I'm raising this as a hypothetical question, but we're also in Galus. We're also had this temple that was destroyed for over almost 2,000 years. So are we in a cycle now?
Why does the temple have to do with the land?
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That's an excellent point. We once talked about this in our Wednesday night classes around Tu B'Shvat, that Shmita, if you think about it, you know, if I would ask anyone, why don't we have Yovel B'Zman Haseh? Right? We don't have Yovel. We don't observe the halachas of Yovel. We may count it. We may know when it is, but we don't observe Yovel today. Now, why is that? What's your knee-jerk reaction? Almost anything I ask you, why don't we do this B'Zman Haseh these days? You say, there's no Beis Hamikdash. Right? That's our no Beis Hamikdash. Right.
Or you're not sure exactly what it is.
Or it could be because we're not sure because we lost count. That's exactly what we're doing today. Make sure everyone is drinking because it's definitely hot. Oh, so that's already an educated answer. The knee-jerk reaction would be the Beis Hamikdash. And she says, hey, the temple is the temple. The temple is connected. You want to know why I don't have korbanos today? Why don't we offer animal sacrifices? That good guess would be, well, there's no temple. Okay, that would be a good guess. Why is there no bikurim, bringing the first fruits? Well, where did you bring the first fruits? Oh, you brought them to the temple. You brought them to the Beis Hamikdash. Mitzvahs which are connected to the Beis Hamikdash. If you don't have the Beis Hamikdash, it's logical you don't have them. But Shmita, and for that matter, Trumotu Masrot, they're not temple mitzvahs. They're not Beis Hamikdash dika halachas. So what does the temple have to do with it? Let's look at the Rambam. Is the Rambam saying that it's because the temple was destroyed? Let's look carefully at the Rambam. Right. So let's see. Is it about the temple? Right. So he says when the land. See, the fact that he says when it ceased, the land remained desolate for 70 years. The fact that he's talking about the land being desolate, and the fact that he mentions before the temple being destroyed, he says that the year in which they left, when the first temple was destroyed, it was the 36th year, right? And then at that point, it was ceased. The counting ceased. So I'll tell you honestly, probably if I only knew this Rambam, it would sound like he is connecting it to the Beis Hamikdash, which is a difficulty. Based on my knowledge of other sources in the Rambam, I can tell you that it has more to do with the fact that the people left. The critical factor is the fact that the Jewish people aren't there. As we said in the very beginning, right? When did we start counting? Only when the people had their personal family inheritance, their personal lot. This has to do with the idea, and I'll say this just really parenthetically, that there's a difference between the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash in the Rambam's view. The first Beis HaMikdash, the land was sanctified when we came here with Yoshua, and that activated all the mitzvahs of the land. When we left, not only did we leave, the land lost its sanctity. It lost its kedusha, which Yoshua invested it with when they came. And the Rambam explains, because it was conquered, that's how it got its kedusha. So when it was conquered back, I don't want to say easy come, easy go. It wasn't easy come and it wasn't easy go. But if it's conquered, so the kedusha comes from the conquest. If it's conquered back, if it's conquered by the Babylonians, then the kedusha, which came with the original conquest, now is paka. It evaporates. It's gone. However, says the Rambam, and this again is parenthetical. He doesn't say this here, but you'll need to this point to understand what's going to happen now. The second coming of the Jewish people, I don't know if that's the right terminology. The second ascent of Yoshua, of Ezra to of Eretz Yisrael. When Ezra came back after the 70 years, they didn't conquer the land. It was under Persian rule. They came by license of Koresh, Melech Paras, King Koresh, the Persian king. He gave them permission to come back. And says the Rambam, interestingly, and I'm not getting into the whole thing, he says the second Kedusha, the second return to Eretz Yisrael, that had more potency than the first one. Usually we think like the original, that was like always the best. Says the Rambam, no. The second settlement in the days of Ezra, the beginning of the second temple period, was so enrooted, so entrenched, that even after the Khurban, when the Romans destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, as opposed to the first destruction, the second destruction, the Kedusha, the holiness of the land, remained with the land. The land did not lose its holiness. And that is why we're going to see, I'm foreshadowing here for you, that after the second destruction in 68 or 69 of the Common Era, the land did not lose its holiness. And that's how come we are still counting. And in the 70 years of Golus Bavel, in the Babylonian exile, they did not count. But that's what we have to look at here. In those 70 years, the Rambam says the counting ceased. I told you it's because really the Jewish people left. The holiness of the land terminated, it expired. So now what happens, and here I'm going to prove it to you. Your point that we're going to see in the Rambam right now. The power of Shmita is not such a function of the temple as it is a function of the presence of the Jewish people. Says the Rambam, watch what he says. After the 70 years, the second temple was built. The second temple lasted 420 years. You're getting, I don't want to call it trivia, but you're getting basic historical perspective today. The second temple, interestingly, lasted longer than the first temple. The first temple, 410, the second temple, 420. These are all, by the way, dates are rooted in the Talmud. Then Ezra was the leader at the time. He came up from Babylonia to Judea in the 7th year of its construction. So look how it works, kind of backwards. We're here in our age. We came, and then we're hoping for the Beis HaMikdash to be built. In those days, there was a small, unofficial, what's the word? Not a convention, like a contingent of Jews who came back from Persia, began building the Beis HaMikdash. But this was not an official settlement. They did not have a real yishuv. Only 7 years later, when Ezra came, was there an official settlement of Jewish people in Yerushalayim, in Judea. And look what the Rambam says. When did they start counting Shmita in the second? And when does the second counting begin? Not from the beginning of the temple, just like in the first temple. Try to stay on the screen. Just like on the first arrival of the Jewish people, it doesn't go by when Yeshua came into the land, right? You have to wait till the settlement. Everyone has their vine in their field, personal vineyards, personal fields. So too, the second counting. We forgot the first counting is no longer relevant according to the Rambam. What happens? That doesn't go by the temple. The temple was founded in year 1. Ezra came in year 7 of the temple. It says the Rambam what? Read it with me. In the 7th, for this was the second coming to the land from that year on. What year? The 7th year of the Beis HaMikdash. They began a different counting, the second counting. So we see here explicitly that what instigated, what got the ball rolling for the second counting? It was Ezra coming, because when Ezra came, he was Mekadesh the land. He sanctified the land again, which had law. It's hard for us to imagine this. We're so used to the idea of Eretz Yisrael's Kodesh. It's always Kodesh. During those 70 years, as the Rambam says, it was desolate. It wasn't just describing what Mark Twain described in that famous essay, there's no one here, it's a wasteland. It was also desolate from a holiness, from a halachic point of view. If someone would have snuck back to Israel in those 70 years, the land would not have had the chiyuv of Trumos and Maestros probably. To separate ties, there would not have been that chiyuv. So that's what the Rambam says. So we begin counting. Now this counting is super important because, as I already told you, the second settlement, the second Shivat Zion, return to Eretz Yisrael, I don't know how it got to be 10 to 12. Speaking of counting, gosh. So the second counting was important to us. Says the Rambam, in those 70, in those years, I'm going to say it out, I'll pen now. We can look at it maybe in a second. Let me just make sure I give across the ideas in an orderly fashion. Don't get down to the wire and get confused like last week. Says the Rambam as follows. During those 420 years, or actually, shall I say 413 years, right? Because the first 7 years don't count. The Jewish people counted the Shmita. Now, here's the critical point. Already in those years, says the Rambam, we did not have the mitzvah of Yovel. Okay? This is the critical point. We did not have the mitzvah of Yovel because, unfortunately, as you probably know, most Jews didn't come back. Most Jews stayed in Bavel. Even we have I would venture to say we have a higher percentage of Jews today who came back than in those days. The overwhelming majority stayed back in Bavel. I'll take the question, but let me try to just make sure I get across this main point. She wants it keeps. So watch what happens, says the Rambam. This is the Rambam's opinion. The Rambam says that already even from the end of the first temple, you guys all heard of the 10 lost tribes, right? That's, there's a lot of fantasy about that, but that was a fact and it has halachic ramifications. Once the 10 tribes, already towards the end of the first temple, weren't there, we did not observe the Yovel because the Yovel is contingent on the presence of the, let's say, the majority of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, each with their designated tribe. But says the Rambam, now this may sound like a technicality, but it's critical. Says the Rambam, in the second temple, the way we count, we still count the 50th year, okay? Even though we're not observing it, we still counted 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 49. 50th year is Yom. It's like a placeholder. It's like a space marker, right? It was a blank. We didn't do anything special in the 50th year, but to keep the cycle like it originally was. Remember I said in the beginning how there was a discussion in the Gemara whether the 50th year is part of this 49 or not part of the 49? Is part of the Shmita or is it not part of the Shmita? The Rambam holds that it's not part of the Shmita. And he says even more extreme, even when we're not observing the Yovel year. Certainly when you're observing the Yovel year, it goes 49, 50, count another 49, right? The 51st year is the first year of the 7 years afterwards. However, the Rambam holds that even when there is no more Yovel, you have to put a blanket. You have to put a space in to keep the track and keep the 49 in sync. Which means, says the Rambam, look at this beautiful Rambam. If so, now what, I love this. Okay. Hence, you may infer, in what's marked as 4 here, that the year in which the last temple was destroyed, that I'm just going to read it, I'm not going to explain, beginning with the Tishrei, or 2 months following the destruction, since the count of Shmita and Jubilees from Tishrei, was the year after the sabbatical year. Okay? We know from the Gemara that the second temple was destroyed. Watch this. This is how we know. We're about to find out how we know what's up. The second temple, says the Gemara, was destroyed in a Shmita year. Okay? If I know that, and I also know how many years have elapsed since the destruction of the temple, I can then calculate where we are. Like I said in the beginning, we're waking up now. How did I get here? Where are we? I need an anchor. I need to find the last known official Shmita. So the Gemara tells me that the second temple was destroyed in the Shmita year, and I know the Rambam's system is that you still count 49, and then a blank Yovel, and then again 49. So based on that, you can do it on the whiteboard, on your calculator, on your spreadsheet, which I tried to do. According to this computation, drum roll, please. The present year, the Rambam is writing, this is unbelievable, he's writing almost 1,000 years ago, he's writing 900 years ago. He said, this present year, I don't know if he even dreamed that in the year 2021, 5781, people would be reading this and be like, whoa, okay? The present year, the 1,107 since the destruction, right? The Rambam is living 1107 after the destruction, okay? So if the destruction was in 68, I think I'm making myself a little note here. You can do the math. The destruction would have been, anyone to help me? All right, we don't have time. Let's do it this way. We'll do it in English calendar. 68 plus 1107. Shouldn't be too hard, right? 75? 1175. Yeah, and just to save you that I'm doing it in the secular calendar, forgive me. Shem will forgive me. 1175. The Rambam is writing in 1175, okay? 1107 after the destruction. So what does he say? So it comes out, I'm going to read through this whole thing. This present year, the 1,107 since the destruction, which is the year 1,487 of the Seleucidian era, forget that, used in the dating document, which is the 4,936 since the creation. He's using also the way we count, 4936. We're in 5781. He's in 4937. Is a sabbatical year in the 21st year of the Jubilee. Okay? According to the way so where is the Rambam rooting his Shmita in? In the beginning of Ezra, right? When Ezra comes, the Rambam is still counting 50, 50, 50. That's how he counts it, and he arrives at his calculation. Now, this is, hold on to your seat. Baruch Hashem, we have another 2 or 3 minutes. Says the Rambam, and everything the Rambam says, especially Rambam, who was such, not just a tremendous scholar, he was the ultimate, shall we say, rationalist. In other words, everything was logical, everything was calculated. He had sources for everything he wrote. And if he said that this was his calculation, this was the way the system was done, you be sure that he could prove it to you from today till tomorrow. Now watch where the Rambam bows, where the Rambam differs. This is the Rambam saying, he's saying, according to my calculation, and the Rambam was not in Israel at the time when he wrote this, but he was near Israel. He was probably in Egypt, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think he was in Egypt at the time. He knew people in Israel. If they would be asking him, he would tell them, sorry, this year is your Shmita. This year is your Shmita. Now watch this. However, all the Gaonim were the heads of the yeshivas in Bavel. After the Talmud was closed, was finished, was edited and redacted, and there were still great yeshivas in Bavel. The Babylonian Talmud was finished, but those scholars who continued the tradition of the Amoraim, of the scholars of the Talmud, the sages of the Talmud, they continued to run major yeshivas there. They're called the Gaonim. They were the predominant halachic sources after the close of the Talmud, right up till before the Rambam's time. Maybe been overlapping a little bit. I'm not such a great historian here, but the Rambam says the Gaonim said no. They have a tradition. Ish mipi ish. I translated that from one mouth to the other, meaning an oral tradition from teacher to student, teacher to student. Watch. How do we learn halacha? How do we know what to do? How do we even know what day is today? What year is this year? Is it based on the texts, on the sources? Usually we say, Lo b'shamayim. You're all familiar with that great story in the Gemara when they wanted to bring a proof to a Talmudic argument from the Baskol, from an angelic heavenly voice that rang out in the base matters. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel rejected that, saying it's not in heaven. We do it by our own scholarship, by our own learning. Says the Rambam, that may be true. We don't listen to heavenly voices, but we do listen to tradition. And did not write the song. The Gaonim stated that they have a tradition from one mount to another, but they only counted the Shmita cycles in the 70 years between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple, and not the Yovel cycle. Likewise, after its last destruction, they did not count the 50th year, only cycles of 7, starting from the year of the destruction. Says the Rambam, the Gaonim had a different method. There's a lot of discussion here. I'm going to give you a simplified version. First of all, the Gaonim say, not like the Rambam, the Gaonim said that in those 70 years, the cycle kept going. We don't have two distinct cycles. The Rambam said, first temple ends. Second cycle begins with Ezra. Say the Gaonim, no. The ball but continue to roll, yet the Gaonim, once there's no practice of Yovel, you don't count the Yovel. Right? In the Rambam's view, based on the Talmud, one, that you need the space holder, the placeholder, right? You may not be doing anything that 50 years, but you got to keep it organized, got to keep it synced. The Gaonim, once there was no practice of Yovel, they let it roll 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, or if you will, 49, 49, 49, 49, and they're continuing from the original Shmita, from the times of Yoshua after year 14 of the conquest. And that's how it unfolds. According to them, they all meet in the year of the destruction, because the Gemara tells us that the year of the second temple's destruction, that was a Shmita year, right? So that we know, whether you're counting 49, 49, 49, or you're counting like the Rambam 50, 50, 50, whether you're including the 70 years in between or not the 70, are you shaking it because like this? It may need a little engineering. There's a little engineering here that may need to be done, but it's a Gemara. Everyone has to. There's certain kind of landmarks in the calendar, in this like overarching calendar, that everyone has to somehow make their system work. Some people will flow easier. Some people have to do a little bit like that. But let's assume that. But so watch what the Rambam says. I love this. This reminds me of the Mishnah. I think this is the Mishnah says in Maseches Rosh Hashanah. You may recall we have another part of our calendar which is based on the Chachamim, as opposed to the Shabbos, of course, which is 7 days. It's Rosh Chodesh, right? It's based on the moon. And it's based not just on the moon, astronomically, empirical, objective information, it's based on the Beis Din. When does the Beis Din decide? You remember that story in the Mishnah, in the second parak of Rosh Hashanah, where according to Rabbi Gamliel, the president of the Sanhedrin, what happened? He said it's Rosh Chodesh today. And Rabbi Yeshua said, you're wrong. You made it's an egregious error. It's a mistake. It's not today, it's tomorrow. Who cares? When do you have a Rosh Chodesh party? It was Tishrei. And the question is, when is Yom Kippur? And Rabbi Gamliel said, I am the president of the Sanhedrin. And it goes by the Beis Din. It goes by the Chacham. By the way, even if we're making a mistake, we decide Rosh Chodesh. So he commanded Rabbi Yoshua to come to Rabbi Gamliel with his staff in his wallet on Rabbi Yoshua's Yom Kippur. Right? Remember that story? Meaning, basically, bow to the authority of the Beis Din. And Rabbi Yeshua did it. And Rabbi Yeshua kissed, and Rabbi Gamliel, the president, kissed him on his head for deferring to the authority of the Sanhedrin, even though Rabbi Yeshua thought Rabbi Gamliel was wrong. Now, I'm making this as an analogy. The Rambam is saying, I have my calculations, I have my reasons, I think I'm right. This is Shmita year. However, according to the Gaonim's calculations, read this with me. All the Gaonim say that they have a tradition from one mouth to another. Oh, I read that already, sorry. 6. The Shmita year then is widely known among the Gaonim and the residents of the land of Israel. They exclusively counted from the destruction, numbering them off 7 by 7, meaning they don't have a 50th year. According to the calculation, this year, which is 1107, is the year after the Shmita. Last year was Shmita. Says the Rambam. It's very rare, you should know, for the Rambam ever to cite differing opinions. The Rambam wrote his whole Mishnah Torah to be bottom line. What is the bottom line? Not with all the confusing disagreements of the Talmud, but here the Rambam not only quotes the differing opinion, he says, on this we rely, and according to this calculation we rule regarding Meiser and Shmita Ksafim, right, the foregoing of debts. Says the Rambam, and with this we conclude, for tradition and common practice, I'm going to read it in the Hebrew also, Shah Kabbalah Ba'Meiser. Kabbalah does not mean Kabbalah. It doesn't mean mysticism. Kabbalah means tradition and common practice. The way that there have been Jews living in Eretz Yisrael for all these years. How are they doing it? Me and my calculations, me and my scholarship, me and my sources, I think I'm right. But when it comes to practical halacha, we go by the tradition of the Gaonim and by what? By the common practice of the people. These are the great pillars of halachic ruling, and it is fitting to rely upon them. Therefore, we then, I don't want to say throw out, but we disregard the Rambam's calculation. And today we are following that. If you want to make a calculation quickly, you can do this for homework. I won't keep anyone here. I'm scared actually to count with the wrong number, and then they'll really be in trouble. Technically speaking, if you count like the Gaonim, and the year 1175 was the year the Rambam wrote this, then what you need to do is 1175 of the. Oh, we can do it very easily. Watch it. The Rambam said, okay, watch this. We'll end with the calculation. Oh man, I hope it works. Okay, I gotta use mine just in case I need to forge. The Rambam told us that he is in what year? The Rambam told us he's 1107 since the destruction. But he said to us that he's in the year 4936. He told us he's in year 4936. He told us, we know this upcoming year Shmita. No, we'll take this year, 5781 minus 4936, 845. I hope this works. 840, meaning what? There's 845 since that year of the Rambam. Now, if we divide this by 7, we don't need to pay attention to 50s anymore because we're with the Gaonim, right? They don't count the 50th year. They just count 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So what do we need to do? All we need to do is divide that by 7. So I'm just going to look at the 120 point something, 120 times 7. Beautiful. It's almost correct. It comes out to 840 with the remainder of 840. It's off by a year. It's off by a year. Oh, no, 1 second. Hold on, sorry to bother you, hold on. It's off by 1 second, hold on. The Rambam says that 1170, the Rambam says that 4936, according to the Gaonim, was the first year of Shmita, right? Was the first year of Shmita, which means, hold on, don't go away. 4936 was the first year of Shmita. We're now, so we need to do 5, let's do next year is 5782 minus 4936. 6. Right? I'm making sure it's not Sheish Ushloshim Channel Barbat Alafim Liyitzira. 8. Oh, I made a mistake. I didn't forge anything, I promise. 846, meaning we're 846 since the Rambam's year. We've 846 years the Rambam wrote these words. He tells us that according to the Gaonim, that was year 1 of the cycle, right? So if you take 846, right, and divide it by 7, 846 divided by 7. You understand why I'm dividing by 7? How many sabbaticals there were? So it's 120 with the remainder of 6. This year now is the 6th year, right? This is the 6th year. I mean, next year will be the 847th year. 847, I venture to say, divided by 7 equals 121 with no remainder. Meaning it'll be the 121st Shmita. And again, according to the Rambam, since the Rambam wrote these words, if you want to know, since the destruction of the temple, then we would add 1107 plus 4936. If you want to just try this, 1107 plus, plus 846 equals 1953. We're right now 1953 since the destruction of the temple. And we're going to divide that by 7. That should come out. Yeah, beautiful. Baruch Hashem, no remainder. 279. Second temple, right? But don't forget, according to the Gaonim, the Rambam vows, it's true that we're 240, but I just say 249. I said Shmita since the destruction of the temple, but that's not where the cycle began. According to the Gaonim, according to many understandings, the counting is still based on the original counting of Yeshua's conquest and division of the land of Israel. That's where we are now. And just give you one last little hint, I hope you understand that Shmita does not have really anything. It may have to do with the second temple, with Ezra, with Yeshua. It doesn't have anything to do with the date, 5781. But there is a trick. It's a coincidence, maybe not a coincidence. If you just take this year in Hebrew's date, 5782 in the beginning, divided by 7, you'll know what years. 5782, next year, this upcoming Rosh Hashanah, divided by 7, you'll come out with 826. No remainder, right? That's a coincidence. The way the years of creation worked, that will give you 5781. If you divide it by 7, you'll come out with 825 remainder of 6, because we're in the 6th year now. Okay, but that's just a rule of thumb. It doesn't reflect any halachic reality. But again, what we did learn is we woke up from our sleep. We're back in Eretz Yisrael. We need to find an anchor. How do we know next year is Shmita? We saw the Rambam's approach. We see that he bows to the Gaonim, and next year, then by even according to the Rambam, will be the Shmita year. You got a question?